Greetings, it is Max So Diddly here, and today I am here with another Visual Basic tutorial to help you get an A in your coursework or exam. And today we're here with validating a password using Visual Basic. So before we get in the future we are going to have more password validation tutorials for Visual Basic, like we do with Java and C#, because there are many things you can do. In this tutorial we're going to do a simple length check to check if the password is a certain length. And then we're going to check that, does it have any white spaces? If it does, it's going to be invalid. And then we're going to ensure the password has a number, an uppercase, a lowercase, and a special character. Obviously, you don't have to include all of these in your validation, but we're going to cover that in this tutorial. So let's get right into it. So in our main subroutine, we've got console.writeLine, validate password, and then we're going to pass in a password. This is going to be where we're going to call our validation, and we're going to print out true or false. And so let's look at our validate password function. It's a function. It's called validate password. We're going to take in a string called password, and it's going to be a Boolean function, meaning we're going to return a true or false. True meaning the password's valid, false meaning the password's invalid. So, the first thing we want to do in our validate password function is we want to do dim minimum equals 5. Basically, we are creating a variable which is going to be the minimum length our password can be. And then we're going to do if not passwords.length is greater than or equal to minimum, then return false. Basically, if the password isn't greater than or equal to the minimum length that we've defined up here, the password is too short and is therefore invalid. Now you could change this to be has to be less than a maximum, maybe has to be equal to a certain value, maybe has to be in between a range. If you want to learn more about different types of length checks, click the eye up in the corner and we'll have a whole range of ways you can do a length check. But in this tutorial we're going to check if it's greater than or equal to a minimum. And we return false in here because there's no point checking the rest of the password, regardless of if every other aspect of the password is valid. The fact is, it's not greater than or equal to the minimum length, therefore it can never be valid. After that, we want to do a bunch of variable declarations. So we're going to do dim has num equals false, dim has cap equals false, dim has low equals false, dim has spec equals false, and dim current character as char. So what are we doing here? Well, we're creating 4 booleans here, all are going to be false. And then we're going to create a current character, just to store the current character a check-in in the string. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a for loop, and we're going to check every character. And every time we find a match for a number, a capital letter, a lowercase letter, or a special character, we then set these to true, and then at the end we can check if all of these are true or not. If they're all true, the password's valid. If they're not all true, the password's invalid. So the first thing we want to do is we want to do for I as integer equals 0 to password.length minus 1 and then an X at the bottom. So we're doing a for loop here which iterates through every element of an array, or in this case a string, and a string is basically a character array. So we can interact with it like an array, as in we can check each character of the string. Which is why we set I to equal 0 and we go until password.length minus 1. So we loop through the whole string. Inside we're going to do 2 things. Firstly, we're going to do current character equals password.chars I. And that basically gets the character of a string at a desired index. And since we want to loop through every single element of this password, we're going to just set it to I. Now, we don't actually need to create this character. We could, in theory, always just reference chars I. But I'd rather have a variable dedicated for it to make it easier to read, as this tutorial is mainly aimed at people learning how to code, not those who are super advanced. And then after, we're going to actually do if char.isWhitespace, pass in the current character we're looking at, then return false. So we don't want any white characters in our password, or white spaces. And we need to check every single character. So before we even bother to check for the number, capital letter, lower letter, or special character, we're going to check if there's a white space. If there is any one white space or one white character, this whole password is invalid. And therefore, we don't need to bother checking anything else, so we can just return false. After that, we've got a few if statements. So we've got if integer.tryparse current character 0, then hasNum equals true. What's going on here? We're going to attempt to convert the current character to an integer. If it succeeds, this returns a true. Therefore, this can be a true. And we put in a 0 here because normally you'd put in an integer you'd want to put in the number you attempted to pass into, but since we don't need that, we can just put in a 0. And obviously, if that works, then we have a number, therefore it's true. Then what we can do is we can do else if child.isUpper current character, then hascap equals true. So we're checking if a character is an uppercase letter. That's the key part here. And then for the next else statement, we can do child.isLower current character, then hasLow equals true. And again, isLower checks if a character is a lowercase letter. Then we do else, and we do hasSpe equals true. And you might be thinking, but Max, you can't just make the assumption it's a special character. But think of it this way. We've already checked for a white space, we've checked for a number, we've checked for a lowercase character and an uppercase character. For the purpose of this tutorial, we don't have much left to work with. We just have special characters because they're not numbers and they're not letters. And isUpper and isLower check for characters, as in letters. They don't check for special characters or numbers. They only return true if it's a letter and is either uppercase or lowercase, depends on what you're asking for. So while there are ways you can check for a special character, I think for the purpose of this tutorial, just having an else statement is perfectly reasonable, especially for an exam or your A-level coursework. Now we could use a regex pattern and we will in the next tutorial. But for this tutorial, this serves the purpose just fine. Underneath the next, we are going to do return hasNum and hasCap and hasLow and hasSpe. So what's going on here? Basically, a little bit of Boolean algebra. If you have a bunch of Booleans, the overall outcome of those Booleans will be a true or a false. With an AND statement, if every Boolean is true, then the overall outcome is true. Let's say we have 3 trues and 1 false, and we have an AND statement for all of them. Then the overall outcome is going to be false, because everything has to be true when we use AND statements for the overall Boolean to be true. Unlike an OR statement where only one thing has to be true. So in this case we can do hasNum and hasCap and hasLow and hasSpe. If one of these are false, then this return will send a false back to where we call the function. If all are true, then the password's valid, therefore we send a true back to where the password is called. If all of these are false, then we return a false. It's just a more elegant way of doing this than a bunch of if statements checking every possible combination. And that's it for this tutorial. So we're going to test our validation in action. So we've got just a string, we've got a letter, 2 letters, 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, we've got a special character, we've got some numbers and no white spaces. So let's save our work and hit play. It returns a true because we match all the validation criteria. Let's put 1AB exclamation mark. So we've got all the types of characters we want, but the password is less than the minimum. It's a false because that's 4 characters, not 5 or more. Let's put in a bunch of white spaces with an A at the end. It returns false because there are white spaces. Let's put in some exclamation marks, a lowercase a, and some numbers. It returns a false because there's no uppercase letter. And that's it. So thanks for being a great audience. Be sure to leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to see more Visual Basic tutorials. And thanks for being a great audience. I'll see you next time.